The plate slid across the polished table with a heavy, final sound. A perfect rack of ribs, glistening under the lights of Small's Paradise. It was Juneteenth, 1963. The air in the famous restaurant was thick, electric, with a terrible silence. Every soul in that packed room held their breath, their eyes locked on table 7. The man sitting there, Marcus "Smooth" Henderson, was trembling so violently he couldn't even pick up a fork. He had enjoyed this very table in this very corner every Tuesday and Friday for 11 long, comfortable years. But not tonight. Tonight, he was a ghost seeing his own death. Eat. The word was quiet, calm, yet it cut through the silence like the crack of a whip. It came from the man sitting opposite him, a man who looked older, grayer, dressed in a suit that had seen 1,000 miles on a train from hell. A man who carried nothing but a paper bag 3 days ago. Bumpy Johnson, the real King of Harlem, had come home. And his first stop was not his wife's embrace. It was this table, this reckoning. For 11 years, Marcus "Smooth" Henderson had lived like an emperor. He wore $400 Italian silk. He drank French cognac. He cruised Harlem in a midnight blue Cadillac Eldorado, a king surveying a kingdom he had stolen, a kingdom built on a foundation of pure betrayal. While Bumpy Johnson, his mentor, his king, counted the endless brutal days in Alcatraz, Smooth had made a deal with the devil. He sat with Vito Genovese himself. He traded the locations of Bumpy's cash houses, the names of his loyal cops, the secrets of his entire operation, for a crown that was never his to wear. He grew rich. He grew powerful. He slept peacefully in his penthouse overlooking Central Park, believing the past was buried forever. He was wrong. The past had just walked through the door. It began on June 7th, 1963, the day the gates of Alcatraz swung open. Bumpy Johnson stepped out, 56 years old, every one of those years etched into his face. But his eyes, they were the same, cold, still, calculating. They were the eyes of a storm waiting to happen. He didn't go home. He didn't rest. He went straight to a small apartment on 145th Street, to the one man he knew had never bowed, never broken. Junie Bird, now gray but with a loyalty forged in steel. Bumpy didn't even sit down. Give me the names. And Junie did. He had a list, a ledger of betrayal kept over a decade of silent watching. One name, above all others, made Bumpy's jaw tighten until the muscle jumped. Marcus Henderson. This was the deepest cut. Smooth hadn't just been a soldier, he had been a son. Bumpy had plucked him from the gutter of 118th Street in 1947. He taught him the numbers game, the delicate art of the policy bank, the silent language of power. He protected him, shielded him, built him up. And when the conspiracy charges came down in 1952, Bumpy entrusted everything to this young protege. Hold it together, take care of the organization, take care of my people. For 2 years, Smooth did. Then, the money for Bumpy's wife stopped. The letters stopped. The loyalty evaporated like a morning dew under a brutal sun. He sold the kingdom to save his own skin. For 11 years, Bumpy had nothing but time. Time to think, time to plan, time to let the cold fury settle into a plan as sharp as a surgeon's scalpel. He asked Junie one more question. Where does he eat? The answer was simple. Small's Paradise, table 7, 9 o'clock, like clockwork. Bumpy looked at his watch. It was 6 p.m. on a Friday. Get me the table right next to his. At 8:50, the legend walked in. He was a ghost in a frayed charcoal suit, a whisper from a forgotten era. The bustling energy of Small's Paradise didn't die, but it changed. It hushed. It bent. Old-timers felt a chill. Young hustlers stared, their bravado melting away. That's Bumpy Johnson. I thought he was dead. He moved through the crowd like a shark through calm water, everyone instinctively giving him space. He went straight to table 8. Junie Bird was already there, along with Willie Fish Jackson and Raymond Quick Lewis, 3 old warriors, their faces like stone. Bumpy sat with the back to the wall, facing the door, an old habit for a man who knew enemies could come from anywhere. And then,
At 9 o'clock exactly, he arrived. Marcus Smooth Henderson, a vision in cream-colored silk and diamonds, laughter on his lips, 4 hulking bodyguards forming a wall around him. He was hoarding court, the picture of untouchable power, until his eyes landed on table 8. The laughter died in his throat. His face went white. His blood ran cold. His bodyguards tensed, hands flying to their waistbands. The entire restaurant seemed to lean in. Marcus. Bumpy's voice was quiet, yet it cut through the restaurant. Come sit with me. It was not an invitation. It was a command from a throne Smooth had forgotten existed. One of the bodyguards, a man named Leon, stepped forward. Mr. Henderson don't take meetings without... He never finished. Junibird stood up. He was 63 and looked like a gentle grandfather, but the .45 automatic in his hand was the most serious thing in the room. The man said, "Sit down." In a heartbeat, the restaurant became a powder keg. Shotguns appeared from under tables. Revolvers were drawn. Every single patron froze, some sliding under their tables. The jazz band's music stuttered into silence. But Bumpy, he didn't even blink. He just kept those cold eyes locked on Smooth. "Tell your boys to go home, Marcus. This conversation is between you and me." Smooth's world was collapsing. He looked from his armed men to Bumpy's terrifying calm. He was a king whose castle was made of sand, and the tide had just come in. "Go," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Boss," Leon tried again. "I said go," Smooth screamed, the sound raw with panic. The bodyguards retreated, their eyes wide with a mixture of fear and shame. They left their king to face his judgment alone. Smooth sat. The chair felt like an electric chair. Bumpy signaled a waiter, who nearly tripped in his haste. "Get us a plate of ribs, the good ones, and 2 glasses of bourbon." The food came, the steam rising like an offering. Bumpy pushed the magnificent plate across the table. "Eat."
Smooth stared at the ribs. They might as well have been crawling with maggots. I'm not hungry, Bumpy. Listen, please, I can explain everything." Bumpy leaned forward, just an inch, and the temperature at the table dropped 20 degrees. "Eat," he repeated, his voice dropping to a deadly whisper, "because this is your last meal." The truth crashed over Smooth then. This was not a negotiation. This was not a discussion of business. This was a ritual, a public execution with a side of collard greens, the final supper. Tears, hot and shameful, began to stream down Smooth's face. "Bumpy, please, I had to survive. You were gone. The Italians, they were taking everything. I made a deal to save the organization." "You made a deal to save yourself," Bumpy corrected him, his voice still terrifyingly quiet. "You gave them my policy banks, my collectors, my roots. You told Genovese every secret I ever trusted you with, and then you kept the money that should have gone to my wife. You let her struggle while you wore diamonds. I was going to make it right. I swear on my life. I was waiting for you to come home." Smooth sobbed, his expensive suit now stained with desperation. "I've been home for 3 days, Marcus." Bumpy's words were like hammer blows. 3 days. You didn't come see me. You didn't send a word. You didn't send a nickel of the fortune you built on my back. You thought you'd gotten away with it. You thought the king was dead. "I'll give it all back. The money, the territory, everything. It's yours." Smooth was begging now, his regal composure shattered into a million pieces. Bumpy shook his head slowly, a father disappointed beyond words. "I don't want it back from you, Marcus. I'm taking it back from you. There's a difference." And then Bumpy's hand moved, but it didn't go for a gun. It moved to his waistband, and he drew out a simple, worn, straight razor. The metal caught the light with a cruel flash. This was the razor, the same blade that had carved respect from Dutch Schultz's men, the same steel that had negotiated with Lucky Luciano. It was a piece of Harlem history, and it was about to write a new chapter. "You know what the Romans did to traitors?" Bumpy asked, his tone almost conversational, which made it all the more horrifying. "They fed them. They let them have one last taste of the world, and then they executed them in the public square so everyone could see, so everyone would remember the price of betrayal."
Bumpy unfolded the razor with a slow, deliberate snick. "I'm no Roman emperor, but I am Harlem, and everyone in this room needs to understand something tonight." Bumpy stood up. His voice rose, not in a shout, but in a clear, resonant declaration that echoed off the walls of the silent paradise. "When I went away, some of you forgot. You forgot who built these streets. You forgot whose blood watered this ground. You forgot that respect isn't something you take. It's something you earn, and it's something you keep." And he turned his burning gaze back to Smooth, who was now weeping openly. "Marcus Henderson forgot. So tonight, Marcus Henderson is going to help me remind every single one of you. Stand up." Smooth tried to resist, his body refusing to obey, but Junie was behind him, the cold barrel of the .45 pressing into his spine. He stood, his legs buckling, a shell of the man who had swaggered in just minutes before. Bumpy walked around the table until they were face to face, the fallen prince and the returned king. The entire restaurant was a still life painting of fear and awe. Bumpy raised the razor. Smooth squeezed his eyes shut, waiting for the final burning cut across his throat. But it didn't come. Instead, Bumpy placed the cold steel against Smooth's left cheek. This was not about ending a life. This was about defining one. With a quick, precise motion, a motion practiced over a lifetime of violence, Bumpy drew the blade downward. It was not a deep cut. It was not meant to kill. It was meant to last. A thin red line opened on Smooth's cheek, welling with blood that immediately began to drip, to fall, to ruin his beautiful cream-colored suit. Smooth screamed, a high, pathetic sound of pain and utter humiliation. "That," Bumpy said, his voice dropping back to a terrifying whisper meant only for Smooth. "That is so you remember. Every single morning, Marcus, every time you look in a mirror to put on one of your fancy ties, you will see my mark. And every person who ever looks at you will know what you did. They will know you are the man who betrayed Bumpy Johnson. That scar is your story now." Bumpy calmly folded the razor, the blood wiped on a napkin, and tucked it back into his pocket. The violence was over. The judgment was complete. He then announced to the hundreds of frozen witnesses, "You have 24 hours to leave Harlem. Take what you can carry, leave the rest. If I see your face after tomorrow night, I will not be this generous." He then turned once more to the hundreds of frozen witnesses. "The rest of you, listen closely. Bumpy Johnson is back. The rules are the same. Pay what you owe, keep your word, protect your people. And if anyone at all wants to test that, you know exactly where to find me." At 9:47 p.m., June 10th, 1963, Bumpy Johnson turned and walked out of Small's Paradise. He left behind a stunned silence, a plate of cold ribs, and a man bleeding out his shame at table 7. He left behind 250 messengers who would spread this story to every corner of Harlem before the sun rose. The lesson was not written in ink. It was written in blood, in fear, and restored order. By noon the next day, Marcus Henderson, Smooth, was on a bus to Philadelphia, a single suitcase by his feet, a bandage on his face, hiding the brand he would carry for life. He never, ever returned. That scar was his crown now, a crown of thorns and perpetual exile. And the message echoed through the underworld like thunder. Within 72 hours, 3 other men who had grown fat on Bumpy's territory quietly vanished from Harlem. Not a shot was fired. They simply understood. The calculus of power had been irrevocably changed. The Genovese family, sensing the seismic shift, sent a captain to talk. The meeting lasted 4 minutes. Bumpy's terms were simple, absolute, non-negotiable. You have 2 weeks to pull every last soldier out of Harlem. Everything north of 110th Street is mine again. The Italians, pragmatic businessmen above all else, looked at the cost, the lost soldiers, the broken alliances, the sheer terrifying will of the man who had just reclaimed his throne with a razor and a plate of ribs, and they left. They withdrew. The profit was no longer worth the price.
Within 6 months, every single piece of Bumpy Johnson's empire was restored. Not through a bloody war that would have burned Harlem to the ground, but through the unstoppable force of reclaimed respect. The night at Small's Paradise became more than a story. It became a legend, a foundational myth of power. Old-timers still speak of it in hushed, reverent tones. They talk about how Bumpy didn't need an army. He didn't need to make a speech to the masses. He simply walked into a crowded room, faced the man who wronged him most, and with one blade and a room full of witnesses, he reminded an entire city who held the true power. He taught them that you can lock a king away for 11 years. You can steal his gold. You can conquer his lands. You can turn his own court against him. But you can never, ever take his throne, not if his right to rule is etched in the very soul of the streets. Bumpy Johnson proved something eternal that night, something that echoes far beyond the world of policy banks and territory lines. He proved that real power is not about who has the most guns, the most money, the loudest voice. True power is about who commands the most unshakable, undeniable respect. And that kind of respect, it is never given freely. It is earned. It is forged in the fires of loyalty, sharpened by intelligence and hardened by the unwavering will to deliver justice, even when that justice is as cold and sharp as a razor's edge. Marcus Henderson betrayed for money. The Italians challenged for territory. They all made the same fatal mistake. They confused absence for weakness, silence for defeat. They learned too late the most important lesson of all. Bumpy Johnson does not make threats. He makes promises. And that man, he kept every single one. That is why, until the end of time, they will call him the Godfather of Harlem.